hello, Gentle Giant friends and fans. Welcome to episode 3 of Giant Chat, sponsored to you by Aspirations, the Gentle Giant Project on Facebook. I'm excited tonight because I get to finally meet two people that I've been fans of since probably around 2004. And I've done videos for them for two of their bands and never have talked to them. This is the first time we've actually met. And that was 19 years ago, something like that. So first of all, we'll go with the beauty first, is Madeline Noland, musician. She's a president. She's a member of Eccentric Orbit, Sky Island, Glass House, and most recently Brave Pursuit, World Traveler, and Cat Lover. And then there's Bill, the one that's not quite as pretty. Musician, composer, author, member of Eccentric Orbit, Sky Island, Glass House, and Brave Pursuit, and Minstrels in the Gallery, a Jethro Tull tribute band.
Wow.
And he's also a world traveler and a cat lover. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and then of course there's Kurt. And for those who don't know, I'm Frank, also known as Bongo Long.
He took over my show.
Somebody had to. So anyway, I'm going to shoot these at. I want to get a little bit of background on Bill and Madeline. When did you guys first start playing, and what was your beginning instrument?
Shall I start?
Sure.
Well, I started classical piano lessons when I was, 6. And did that until I was around 13 when I said, I don't feel like practicing anymore. Then I took up saxophone when I was in 7th grade, and I did that. And I became a music major in college and studied classical saxophone and got a music education degree with that concentration. And now I'm kind of back to keyboards. But on some of the Gentle Giant stuff, you do hear the saxophone, and that's me, kind of going back to the roots, so to speak. But now I play exclusively keyboards, and there's one more band that we have to mention, which is my workplace has a house band, and it is called the Multicasters, and I play keys and Bill plays bass, and there's a gentleman from Dolby Laboratories who plays drums, and a gentleman from Interdigital who plays guitar, and it goes on from there. So anyway, we have a lot of fun. It's really wonderful to keep it up.
Did you have any, Madeline? Did you have any inspirations, musicians that inspired you, that turned you on?
Well, certainly Paul Desmond from the Dave Brubeck Quartet. My father had Jazz Impressions of Eurasia, and we listened to it over and over and over again on LP, and it had a skip in a certain spot. But, it was just one of those things that I thought to myself, I want to do that. The high school that I went to didn't have a jazz program, so I was studying the classical side of things, but I always wanted to emulate that beautiful, beautiful tone.
It's a great band. Great band.
Yeah.
So, Bill, did you start out on bass?
I did not. I started out in grade school on violin, which which did not go well for me.
Me neither.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And eventually my folks got me a little, a cheap learner guitar when I was, 12 or whatever. And it was so cheap, I couldn't do much on it. And I really didn't have any musical inspiration. But by the time I started getting into junior high and high school, I started to get into bands like Styx and Queen and Electric Light Orchestra, Kansas to some extent. And one day in 9th grade, there was a kid my age who had a little Fender Music Master bass, and he was sitting there in our photography class, and he dug it out and he was sitting playing it. And I was like, I can do that. It's got 4 strings. And I went out and bought a Fender Music Master bass and a little amp, and bass just really fit fit what I thought I could do. Within a year or so, I picked up a guitar as well. My uncle actually very kindly bought me a very nice Alvarez acoustic guitar that and I started taking guitar lessons. Bass was my primary instrument, but I realized guitar, you would learn chordal structures, you would learn things that you wouldn't necessarily learn on bass. And that was it just sort of took from there. I did want to go to Berklee College of Music, but my father said absolutely not. Yeah, he said no. He said, I will pay for you to have private lessons. You can do whatever, but you've got to get a real degree, degree. Yeah. Yeah. And so I did. And I took lessons all through college with a jazz guitar player who was cool enough to, dip into what he called, rock and roll and whatnot. And that's where I got, I got a lot of music theory, a lot of fundamentals, and I could take that and apply it to bass. And in the meantime, I'm listening to the likes of, I started with John Deacon and whatnot, and I moved very quickly to Chris Squire and Geddy Lee, and and the rest is history, of course.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's obviously a Chris Squire influence there.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, no question.
You got such a lovely growly bass. Just right,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't sit in the background, and that's for me. Ray, you don't hear him out front.
Right.
He's brilliant, but you don't hear him out front. And Geddy and Chris, I mean, I love that bass forward sound. And that was one of the things, the first time I heard Eccentric Orbit, I was like, oh yeah, I like this. I dig this. I just, how do you do that when you were producing the music? Was there something you did to bring that, or that say Rush was doing that brings that forward, or is it just?
Well, so interestingly, I think a lot of it is in the composition. So when I started writing the Eccentric Orbit music in about 1997 or 8, and I had most of it done when I met Mark Cella at Nearfest in 2000, down in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Interestingly, he was from Massachusetts, but we met in Bethlehem. But the idea of Eccentric Orbit originally was, I didn't have a group. I didn't have a band. In the late 1980s, I bought a sequencing keyboard, and I left the sort of music thing behind, but I wanted to do my own thing. So the sequencing keyboard, I could do drums and some keys, and I could play guitar or bass or whatever I wanted to play on top of that and do some home recording. And when I started at Berklee in 1993, I was very quickly exposed to computer-based sequencing. And I moved over to Cakewalk at that point, which was which was the counterpoint to Pro Tools on the Mac at that time. By 97, I was facile enough, I think, with that to be able to start, making things. And the idea was, well, I don't play bass anymore. I want to play my bass. I want to have some cool music to play my bass to. So the idea was to write music that the bass could shine within the context of that music. And the primary thing that I realized was, what do you have to do to make the bass shine? You got to get rid of the guitar. So what I had in my mind was actually a band that had 2 keyboard players, a la Bonko, who one was playing Greenslade, right? Exactly. So one who's focused on pianos and maybe organ, and the other who's playing the synths and maybe some Mellotron pads and stuff like that. And but the bass could cover a lot of the ground that the guitar was doing. So that was really the etiology of it. And
Kind of a
and
rhythm bass.
yeah, exactly, rhythm bass, right? A lot of what I do is very, you know, I'm raking the pick across the strings, like in Star Power, you know, I'm really just raking to make almost a rhythm guitar type sound. And I'm a decent enough guitar player, particularly on rhythm guitar. I think I have a good rhythm. So I just translated a lot of those techniques over to the bass, and I was using a series of cascading rat pedals to get different levels of, you know, overdrive and distortion to make it sound a little more like a rhythm guitar or whatever. I was highly influenced by Wetton at that time, and also the bass player for Rage Against the Machine, who went on to play with Audioslave. A lot of that stuff was, I heard, you know, I don't love all their stuff. I like some of their stuff, but I heard that sound and I was like, wow, that's a great sound. And it would be great to bring that into like a proggy type of environment. And it meshed with that kind of Wetton era King Crimson. So that was all kind of percolating around in my head when I was writing all this stuff.
Well, Madeline, I want to talk to you in a bit about that wind synth. So we'll take a break here for a second and we'll do that. So Madeline, on the Eccentric Orbit, this is one of the great covers of all time. I think I found this on one of the this is of course the early days of internet shopping, and I don't remember the website, but the guy had nice descriptions, and I saw this cover. But the beauty of this cover, you can see the little guy. He's got a little present for you. Isn't that nice? Except when you look in the back, there he is.
There he is.
When you look at the back, he's got it.
Got a little ray gun.
I always loved that cover. That's great. I mean, this guy's good too.
Yeah,
he's good too. But I'm in love with that guy. So wind synth. So you played sax, and where did you get the wind synth? Where did that come from?
Well, the truth is that the keyboard players that the keyboard parts that Bill envisioned for this music were really hard, really hard. And I'm a much better sax player than I am keyboard player. And, you know, where he mentioned that you're sort of thinking about the keyboards as, you know, you've got perhaps one playing pianos and organs and such, and one playing synths and such. And you think, okay, well, a lot of the synths were monophonic. So why not try a MIDI wind controller in order to trigger monophonic synth sounds. And so we went out and we got a Yamaha WX5 and we got a Korg analog modeling synth module. And the first thing I needed to do was figure out how to design sounds. And that was actually a really interesting journey, learning how to do analog synthesis. And in the end, when we were working on the second album, I had an Alesis, which allowed you to do not only analog synth, but also fusion synth and
DX7, digital synth, right? Digital
just
models,
crazy
right.
stuff. So once I got my head around the idea that you've got an LFO and you've got, your envelopes and you've got, I kind of got all that stuff in my head. But the fact of the matter is that this music requires some chops. You got to be able to play the parts. And like I say, in order to get those fast runs, I really needed to have that
I hear you.
in my hand, if you will.
Yeah, it works out great, Bill
So
gets
one
what
thing
he wants.
Yes,
There we go.
exactly.
And so I wound up playing a little bit of keyboards, but a lot of wind synth. So the single line parts that were a little bit more intricate, I would play the wind synth. And then if you needed some kind of pads and a little bit of stuff going on, I could do that on the keyboards. But one thing that I want to point out, since you showed the little alien guy and both of them, in fact, is that here behind us is the sci-fi collection.
Yes.
So you can imagine that not only are we prog fans, but we're also sci-fi fans. And the music kind of harkens to that, as you can tell.
Well, that of course was part of the beauty of it for me. Is I've been a science fiction fan since I was a kid. And in fact, the review I wrote for you guys on, I think on Prog Archives, was related to that. Do you like sci-fi,
Right.
that type of stuff. And it really, you did really, the thing that was interesting about Eccentric Orbit, and we need to say that you guys aren't doing Eccentric Orbit anymore. There's no money in it. Right.
That's largely what it comes down to. I mean, it was never really something that we expected to make a lot of money on, but I think there's two issues. Number one is just the idea of breaking even on the expenses that you incur for recording and releasing music.
Yeah.
And we did very, very well with that first record, and we did quite well. We certainly covered our costs and made money with the second, even though I still have a ton of them down in the basement. If anybody wants a CD, just contact me. I'd be happy to send you one.
We'll have links.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Music
Cool.
and
Yeah.
some of your other endeavors.
Yeah, that's right. But
which we may talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, there you go.
Ooh,
There you go. Look at that. But it was never something that we expected to make tons of money on. But if you can't cover your costs, then there are significant costs when you get to recording and mixing and mastering and whatnot.
Becomes an expensive hobby.
It becomes an expensive hobby. That's right. And then, the other issue is Eccentric Orbit was never really a very nimble band. We had piles of equipment that we had to truck around. And sometimes we would be we would get offers to play gigs, but it was like we would be the first or the second band of 3 in a night. We would have to get on and off in a very quick time. And it was so stressful and with such minimal return that it just got to a point where there just wasn't enough justification to continue doing it, which is unfortunate.
Let me jump in.
My heart.
Yeah. Let me jump in and say something that, you didn't pick an easy genre of music first of all, you're going to have an audience that by nature is going to be picky. They would be, you would be under a lot of scrutiny, even, if you were to show up at a prog festival, or if you were to even debut this album, but yet the reviews are all you're compared to some pretty big groups, the sound. And
Yep.
some of that is the instrumentation. I mean,
Yep.
The sound of the 70s. And we talked for a minute before the show. The sound on your music is spot on. It doesn't sound 2004. It sounds kind of appropriate for the genre, but it had to be kind of a you were going into bold territory to make music of this kind. But it sounds great. I love the sound. I think for anybody that is just like, what else is out there? Eccentric Orbit is good music to check into. So one of the things I wanted to ask you both was, did you have a love of classical music? Was that part of your, classical or jazz? Was that in your musical tastes? Was that kind of something that come natural, or, were you interested in classical music growing up, either one of you?
No.
No. Okay.
No, and actually it's funny because my parents are huge classical music fans. They would listen to the National Public Radio day in and day out, and it was classical music 24/7, except when we would listen to the Beatles or Simon and Garfunkel or the Dave Brubeck Quartet.
Yeah.
And that was when we would turn on, myself and my siblings. And I have to say that when certain operas came on Saturdays, we would flee the house. So it just wasn't our thing. We never got into it. But for me growing up, I'm younger than Bill, and I wasn't, indoctrinated into some of the music that he was listening to, but I was towing in as a younger person. I was listening to Queen's greatest hits. I was listening to some of that stuff. And then when I met Bill and I started listening to Yes, and I started listening to ELP, I'm like, wow, where has this been all my life? So, I think that for me anyways, when it comes to the sort of symphonic side of this, I was directly into the symphonic prog. Certainly having heard my share of classical music, like it or not, growing up, it definitely wasn't something that I was looking to emulate or to follow. But the symphonic prog, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and that's how I grew up. I mean, we had classical music, and my dad would play some jazz. He didn't have very good taste in jazz, but we would play some of that. and so when I heard progressive rock, it kind of clicked. It was like I was used to kind of a song structure. I was used to different themes in music, but everything that I didn't like, I mean, and there was some that I really did. Like, I liked Tchaikovsky, and I liked certain where there was more of a melody to it.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, a lot of
Romantic.
sounds. Yeah. And so it was like the parts of classical that I did like, progressive rock brought that together. And so anyway, I was just curious whether, because I think you almost have to have an open musical taste palette to even get into progressive rock to begin with. But
yeah, I think exposure. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, my musical heritage was all kinds of stuff. One of my favorite records way back when I was very, very young was, I think it's Frankie Avalon, Venus, if you will, please send from, and then West Side Story came out, and that blew my mind. My mother bought me 3 albums when I was in high school. Pulse the Planets, Respighi's Fiesta Romana, and Vaughan Williams album. And then I got into like Harry Partch and electronic music and percussive ensemble and stuff. And so when I hear, I'm much more symphonic progressive than, the others, although I like it all, but that's what I go for. If I'm looking on Prog Archives and I see symphonic, I go, okay, let me check them out before I'll check out Neo.
Right.
By the way, I wanted to ask you a question. You mentioned, Madeline, you mentioned that you were younger than Bill. When's your birthday, Madeline?
December 28th, 19.
When's your birthday, Bill?
December 28th.
Really?
We are born on the same day, but in a different year.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think that's funny.
Well-
I want to change this over. This is Giant Chat, and this day in history was a concert.
Wow.
Wow.
Oh.
Look at that.
$450 advance, $550 at the door.
I couldn't afford it.
Yeah, Edgar Winter Foghat and a little band called Gentle Giant.
I would have had to take a restroom break during Foghat. I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't know. Foghat was, I love good old rock, and we'll talk about rock and you guys in a little bit.
Okay.
So, what were your guys' first experience to Gentle Giant?
Well, it was we actually shared an experience to tell that full story. I'll do it quickly. I was in a band in the mid 1980s called ICU, and we rather unwisely wanted to do some classic progressive rock along with some progressive-minded popular music, Power Station and Dire Straits and stuff, that was popular at that time. We tried to make a go of that for a while. The person that I was in that band with is now I'm in Minstrels in the Gallery with. We'll get to that later, I'm sure. But we did a Jethro Tull set we were very proud of. It was a 40-minute portion of the set. Yeah, that we did several songs.
Was it good?
And yeah, it was very good. I mean, Chris Devine, who went on to play with Richie Blackmore in Blackmore's Night. He's on the Fires at Midnight album. I mean, he's a musical force of nature. I mean, he's incredible. And this band was my school of rock. I mean, this was where I learned to really play and whatnot. But we, back then, you play a club, you get the sound man. They bring in the bass bins, and they bring in the monitors, they bring in all this freaking stuff, and it costs you $500. And it was like, oh man, we did one night with this little sound man. He looked like John Lennon with the little round glasses, and he was like, he's one of these people that he knows everything about everything, and you don't piss off the sound man. That's the rule number one. So whatever he said was like, yeah, cool. So I mentioned, we're going to do a set of Jethro Tull. And he's like, oh, well, if you like Jethro Tull, then you have to check out Gentle Giant.
Oh.
And of course, I had not heard of Gentle Giant from a hole in the wall, but I was like, okay, because you make the sound man happy. So, the gig went good. Fine. 5 years later, 1990. 5 years later. This is 4 or 5 years later. 1990, Madeline and I are in Nashville. I have left rock music in the dust. I am pursuing my MBA at Vanderbilt University. Madeline is working intrepidly at West End Pizza Hut to pay the bills. But boy, we carved out one day a week that we would hit the shops, usually guitar stores. And at that time, CDs were just sort of coming into bloom, so to speak.
Right.
There were sort of stores that sold used CDs. So we were on Nolansville Road, not Noland, but Nolansville Road, right next to Hubcap Annie's. There was a great CD store that sold. I bought tons of stuff that's still in my collection there, all used stuff, but mint condition. I found for $8 a copy of the Columbia original CD release of Power and the Glory. And that little man's voice rang in my head. If you like Jethro Tull, you'll like Gentle Giant. So I'm like, it's $8. I'm going to give it a shot. We brought it home. We sat on the couch. We put it in the CD player. We started it up, and within 15 minutes, we are flat asleep. I just completely, it was just like, oh my God, what is this? Right. And we were just like, she was like, have you gone mad? And I'm like, well,
There's something.
there. But so, yeah, it was not the great experience that I was expecting, but
Wasn't a good first date.
it wasn't a good first date. But, I think when you really start to get involved in music and you play music, you start to understand that there's music that you may not like, but that you can appreciate, that you identify elements that there's something going on here and it's maybe worth a little effort. And so I spun it, sort of in the background, because I'm in grad school, I got homework and she's off doing stuff. But I was walking from our apartment on 21st Avenue down to the Owen School one day, and I'm skipping along and I'm singing The Face. The little that little part. And I'm like, wait a minute, something's gotten in. There's something has grabbed me. And that was the song that I'm like, okay, if I can connect with this, there's got to be more I can connect with. That album wound up being incredibly important because obviously, through further exploration, I was like, oh my God, this is a treasure trove. I instantly wanted to then get every other Gentle Giant album. But I also realized, and what that led me to at that time was Goldmine magazine, and also some record shows, CD shows that would come through Nashville periodically, because at that time it wasn't easy to find these Gentle Giant. And in fact, they weren't even on CD in 1990 or 1991, some of the records. I did
Probably
get
true, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but what it did was it rekindled my interest in progressive music. And so I'm looking for Gentle Giant, but then I'm like, well, who is Premiata Forneria Marconi? Who is Banco del Muto Socroso, whatever the hell it is? Who are these guys? And it got me into that scene. And then I discovered Laser's Edge and Wayside and Greg Walker and Symphonic. And it was just like, where has this stuff been all my life? And so it really brought me back to what I had originally discovered. The Styx and the ELO very rapidly gave way to Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Jethro Tull and King Crimson, back in the late 70s, early 80s. But I never really went a whole lot deeper than some of those more popular bands. But it was listening to all that stuff, and it was the perfect time to do it because it's all being re-released on CD. So I'm grabbing it all, and that's what really inspired me to say not only, wow, this is great music, but also, look, there's this band called Deus Ex Machina, and there's this band called Nuevo Era, and there's these groups like Anglagard and Anecdote and kids who are making this music on CD. I want one of those. I want to make a CD. And that's what eventually led to the Eccentric Orbit. That inspired me to, when I started with the computer-based sequencing and eventually got back to writing this stuff, it was like, I want to do stuff like that. So, very inspirational.
Yeah,
It's a
and
great
it's interesting
story.
because Gentle Giant certainly is an acquired taste. And he's right. The first time I heard Power and the Glory, I said, oh, what is really? But I would say at this point in time, that particular CD is a Desert Island disc.
Yeah, it's a Desert Island.
Power and the Glory might be my favorite CD in our entire collection, which is pretty vast. I don't know what else comes close. Many, but yeah, amazing stuff. And we did eventually go out and get the others. Yeah, we've been lifelong fans since then, pretty
You know,
much.
one thing that's fascinating to me about Gentle Giant, and I agree with you. I think my story's fairly similar. All of Gentle Giant, I mean, Giant had left music, and the only place you could find their music was in resale shops at the time. The internet had not happened.
Right.
So I want to say Acquiring the Taste was my first one. I couldn't tell you. I bought it. There was somebody I wanted to hear, and finally, when that was the first one that came into the resale shop. But my first experience with them was it was something that at first I wasn't sure, but it was just something that my love for them just developed really quickly, and I'd find their tunes in my head. And my first hearing of Yes was when I was 9, and I got a copy of Fragile out of the library, only because at that age I'd never heard him, but I liked the Roger Dean cover. But I will never forget that day as long as I live, when I put that Yes album on. It had such an impact on me. It was just something that didn't let go. What do you think it is about Gentle Giant that just has that kind of staying power? I mean, there's other music to me that's forgettable, but I find myself, with all the music I listen to, just Gentle Giant is the one that's.
Well, I think you have to understand that we're like ducks. We have an impressionable period where we imprint on certain kinds of music, and that happens in our, you say 9, that's a little early, but I would say the early teens, the late teens, and the music that we imprint on is the music that resonates with us. I think with Gentle Giant, I came to it much later. I was 28 years old, 27 years old when I discovered Gentle Giant. But Gentle Giant is almost, I mean, if prog rock is, if you distill it to its most essential element, it's about complexity in the horizontal sense of being a complex piece that develops over the course of the song, either lengthwise or through multi-parts and, changing forms and whatnot, or vertically through more complex playing within certain sections and whatnot. And usually it's a mixture of those two. Gentle Giant is in some sense the epitome of both of those. They have the counterpoint that they use when you really sit and listen to all the voices that are going on, and the way the different instruments, the bass and the guitar and the keyboards mesh to create a contrapuntal chord and a feeling. It's very special within rock music. And if you have imprinted on that prog and you hear that, and I guess that's what it was like, even if I didn't like some of the dissonant elements or some of the, like So Sincere was like, what is this? Even if you don't like that, it's going to hit you at that point. And then I think you add on top of that, I mean, we talked about, our backgrounds in terms of, did we like classical music? No, but we were exposed to classical music. We were exposed to jazz. We were exposed to Gilbert and Sullivan and musical theater and Rodgers and Hammerstein and things like that had sophisticated musical elements that are going on. And that did shape us, even if we didn't, glom onto Mozart and Beethoven. That did shape our us, just as it shaped Keith Emerson and Dave Stewart and all the people that the people that made the music that we love the most.
Yeah.
So
well, they had to draw that from somewhere. Kerry Minier had to draw
precisely
everything from somewhere.
That's right. Yep. And he
I think you're gonna take a break.
yeah, he assimilated his influences and did a brilliant job of it. Just like yeah.
So yeah, Gentle Giant to me is a little. It's like my mother's Christmas stocking. There's all these little things in there, and they just keep popping up, and you find little nuggets. One of my favorites is Raconteur Troubadour.
Yes.
The violin is playing the verse melody over the chorus. And I didn't know about that for years. And then you say, whoa, now I can't, unhear it. But,
right.
And all the little, I love all the little in between passages, these little things that, where did they come up with that? Yep. It has really, in a sense, really nothing to do with the tune, but fascinating stuff. My first was that guy, the American release, and I was intrigued by the cover, looked on the back, and there, well, not this back, but it showed there was like three brothers and all these instruments, and I said, well, I gotta pick it up. And I was in the School of Music, Naval School of Music at the time, and I got back to the barracks, put it on, and it was not Your Power and the Glory experience. I was immediately in love.
Good.
Yeah, it just, and I think that what you were talking about before, the experience of classical music, because I was in band all through, from like fifth grade all through, and then into college. So I was exposed to a lot of music, and then I got into, the more avant-garde and things like that. So I was ready for it. So you guys were involved with a couple of tribute albums. Giant for a Life, right? And Giant Tracks.
Yep.
these two puppies.
Yep.
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 I just got this copy finally.
Oh, good.
Yeah, a friend of mine sent me one that wasn't really, I won't say his name, but he has the same birthday as his wife.
Oh God.
So, yeah. So in a glass house was Sky Island. And was Tom Benson involved in both of those?
Both of those. He was
Yeah.
the central figure. So I was at Berkeley, and I was on the Gentle Giant email reflector when people started talking about doing the
Giant Tracks?
recording for Giant Tracks as a fan tribute. And I was involved in the discussions about the planning for this. My great contribution to this was that it wouldn't be a double CD without my intervention. Is that they had a call for entries, and they got a great response. Were they all 100% fantastic professional and everything? No, but the idea of this was a fan tribute. And they're like, we're not going to spend all this money to waste our time with these, with the ones that they felt were less than professional. And I'm like, well, okay, that's an interesting question. What is the marginal cost? So I was at Berkeley at the time. I walked down to Newbury Street from my office on Boylston, and there was a CD manufacturing plant there, and I had them costed out. It was like 25 cents for an extra disc for the album, and another 75 cents for the packaging for a 2 CD versus a 1 CD. I'm like, seriously, that's it? And obviously then the mechanical royalties, but all of the mechanicals, the whole idea of this was, a little trickle of money to go to the band. So that was all, it was almost like a donation in a sense. So there was no issue there. So that was my contribution to it, other than playing bass. But yes, Tom was on the reflector, and he and I knew we lived near each other, and got together at that point to record Just the Same, which was the first one that we did together. And then it was later that Mauro Moroni wanted to put together his release, Giant for Life, which is that one. And he put out a call, and that was the point at which we did In a Glass House. And that was essentially the same group. Lance was singing, Tom was playing guitars and other instruments. I played bass. Madeline played saxophone on both those recordings. I don't think we had an actual drummer for Just the Same. I think we did it as a Tom tracked it, but we had a real drummer for Just the Same. Interestingly, Mauro picked up both of the songs. He put both of them on Giant for a Life. So we weren't expecting Just the Same to be on that one, but he repeated it because I guess we'd send it to him as a demo or something. I don't know. But but that's how Tom and I got to be friends. And that was in the late 90s. And, it's a complex story, but I mean, keyboard players, hi caramba, try to find a keyboard player who's going to stay in your band. And the issue is, well, you're right, but you're not really strictly a keyboard player. We had Derek, who played on the first record, and he was just very busy. He had a lot. He was more of a producer, but he was a good player, obviously. Any keyboard player worth their salt who can play this stuff can read music, and they're going to be getting gig offers left and right. And we couldn't
paying.
And better paying. Well, paying at all, right?
Yeah, it's
So,
easier to play.
Yeah. And so we did a gig with another keyboard player, a guy named Ed Brahms, who I'm still friends with. He's a lovely guy. He plays organ in churches and stuff, and he's a great player. He loved the stuff, but he's just like, man, I just can't fit it in. So after that, it was really like, okay, either the band's over or we re-envision it. And that's the point at which I called Tom. Tom and I had kind of danced around each other for a long time about wanting to do something. And I called him up and said, look, man, are you interested? Could you make, could we re-envision EO and then move forward with a configuration where you're playing the electric violin and the guitar, triggering primarily synthesizers with the guitar? And he was totally into it. And we had a very productive writing collaboration where we would send snippets back and forth. I mean, we built Creation of the Humanoids from literally a 3-measure little melody that he sent me. And I took that. I mean, it was amazing. It was just an amazing experience to work on that album with him. And I brought some stuff in. He brought tons of stuff in too. But we also had a great collaboration.
He was such an addition.
He was
to Eccentric Orbit.
That's right. No, that was,
or as the faithful call it, EO.
Yeah, that was the future. But unfortunately, between 2000, 1999, 2000, when Napster hit, and by the time the second record comes out at 2014, the CD is on fumes. And, we already talked about the reasons that the band folded. It was nothing. I mean, we had a great group. I mean, it was sad, but there just was no path forward for this band. So, but yeah, Tom and I go back to that experience on the Giant tracks, and that's how we got together.
I want to bring up one thing. Oh, I'm sorry, Kirk. I want to bring up one thing real quick before we got to wrap it. And that is, Bill is now an author, a published author. Your 4th book will be out.
Third book comes out in April. 4th book will come out in the fall. And I'm in the process of writing a 5th and plan a 6th book in that series. And who knows after that? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there going to be a
yeah. This was a response to the pandemic. In March of 2020, when everything shut down, the music shut down, and also I was doing consulting work at that point. For 2 weeks I was like, yay, I'm free. And then it was like, what am I going to do? What is going on here? So I had always wanted to write. I had worked on a friend of mine's book. It's actually the wife of our drummer in Brave Pursuit, the classic rock band that I'm in now. I had helped her with that book, and that had kind of gotten my juices going. So I had recently heard the song Ghost Girl by District 97. I don't know if you know that band, but
I know the band. I'll have to check the song.
Yeah, definitely check that out, because that's the inspiration for that's Hammer to Fall, right? That's the inspiration for Playing with Fire. Even though I changed a lot of stuff, that was the sort of the germ of the idea. And during the pandemic, basically in 2020, I wrote 2.5 books. I finished the 3rd one up in early 21. That's when I got the publishing contract. I finished the 4th one up in 2021. And since then, it's been more working on editing and do cover design and marketing and whatnot. So I have about half of the 5th book done, and I got to get back to that over the summer and finish that up. Wow. But it's another chapter in my creative life. Who knows where it goes, but it's been a fun little diversion.
Yeah, and I
I
would say
enjoyed it.
fans of thrillers, fans of cerebral thrillers, supernatural, myth in the modern world kind of stuff, and you just want to have a blast reading something that's kind of a page turner, I would definitely check them out. This was book 2 that I was showing a minute ago.
Hammer to Fall. Mine is coming, I think, like Wednesday.
Yeah, cool.
All right, yeah, let us know what you
That's
think.
great.
And this one had a great ending.
Oh,
It
very
had-
good.
It
I'm
had
glad
it
you
had
thought
a
so.
movie ending.
There'll be links. We're going to put links in the show so that people can find
Yeah.
your books and find
Great.
your music. One of the things that kind of ties your experience with music, even in writing, together with Gentle Giant, is that you did something that was important to you. It wasn't so much about. I think Gentle Giant was disappointed. They felt like they were on the verge of getting the acclaim that they deserved. I believe, but you know, the reason that I think they look on what they did, the music they put out there, 10 albums, and they're satisfied with that, is because they made a meaningful contribution. They did something that was worthwhile. They did something that people are still picking up on. They're new Giant fans, and you know, I found your music, and it was those little connections that are the progressive rock community has, and I think the younger fans they're having the same experience that I did. My first band was Rush, really. Well, yes, back when I was 9, but the one that really connected with my teenage years was Rush. But you want to find more music like that, and we branched out to other bands, and I, you know, found Gentle Giant. I would have found them a lot earlier if it wasn't for they were hard to find at the time. But I believe your music has that. It's a great album, and I highly recommend to Giant fans to check out Eccentric Orbit. Frank has some new videos that he has debuted of your music, which, man, Frank, you've got some skills. Bill and I were talking about the recent videos. I don't know how you do it, but it's so appropriate to the music, and you did a lot of work on it. It shows your love for their music. But
yeah, that's a great way to check them out, because it's really fun to watch the video, and you get because it's cinematic music. You're right. Your whole the review you did connected to the film, and you know, musical storytelling. That's really what I was aiming for. Trying to write instrumental music that was in some ways as compelling as vocal music, to tell stories.
Painting a picture.
That's
mine. Yeah.
Yep. That's you got it. So
but like I
think
said, the reviews, when they're comparing you to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, they're comparing you to, I mean, seriously, that's, I mean, well done.
It's quite an honor.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's Marilyn Monroe and Star Power, Enemy of My Enemy, Sputnik. It's really good album. And like I said, you know, you almost have to do what you do in music. I'm not a musician, but I would think you would almost have to do it because you love what you do. It's not so much for the return or the acclaim, but that kind of music stands the test of time, as Gentle Giant did. So,
yeah, Gentle Giant. I can't remember the statement on the first album, but basically they were saying, we don't care for popular. Right. This is what we got. And I think that came over with you guys, is you had a vision, and and you successfully completed that vision. But I had it almost, not, no offense or nothing, but not quite as much as Gentle Giant, but I had an immediate merge with your music. And I used to joke with him when I first got his album, their album, I started communicating with them, and I used to joke I'd be listening to Attack of the Martians while doing yard work, and weeds would grow, but maybe that was just in my mind. Maybe I was smoking the weeds. I don't know.
Well,
But I really thank you so much for that music, and the addition to the whole landscape of and the one thing that I found that was so funny about your music was it was immediately familiar but new, and I think it's that 70s, a lot of the vintage. Which reminds me, where did I put that? There was you remember this?
Oh yeah, sure. That's so those are the guys I'm in Brave Pursuit with. Yeah, Pat, Connor, and Steve Rigo. Yeah, yeah, totally right.
Yeah, I got the Brave Pursuits right there.
That's right.
You still have it. Now, did you use Mellotron on any of the EO stuff?
It's a sample. It's a Mellotron Mark II sample, not an M400. The Mark II is an earlier version, and it's more piercing. The string sound, anyway, is more piercing and more ghostly than the M400, which is a little softer and a little more symphonic sounding. The Mark II is really it's got some guts to it that I really like, and it's kind
of like your bass.
Yes, kind of like the bass. That's right.
And then we gotta talk about your current band if we got the time.
Sure.
Band is Brave Pursuit.
Yep.
And like you say, it's classic hard rock. Not hard. Medium hard.
Yeah. Bad Company vibes. Yeah, some Aerosmith, whatnot. It's in that range.
It's a great it's a great band. It really is.
Thank you.
And I have to say that the song Passage, which I think is probably one of my favorites. It's of course it's a storytelling. I can't remember what's his name.
Right. Yeah.
But the opening with Madeline's is that like a Hammond? Is that a real Hammond?
No, that's a Nord Electro.
Yeah. We like the Nord Electro. Terrific organs and
dirty, wonderful.
Oh man, it's got the balls, doesn't it? Yeah.
We get the John Lord.
That's right.
Yeah.
That inspired. I think that inspired me doing a video on it.
Yeah, that's great.
Cool.
Yeah, it was just but it's you guys. It's a great band, and you guys are still out gigging, right?
Yeah.
We haven't gigged for a while for a variety of reasons. COVID, and then our drummer had a little accident. But we're actually in the process of recording a third album. Which might actually be a double album. A classic 80-minute double album. Yeah. So
right.
we just got a ton, because
a lot of great material.
We've been, we haven't been gigging, and so all the people, including the drummer. Well, no, not Madeline. She doesn't write that much, but I write, and the drummer writes, and the guitar player write. So, and we write together. So we have a lot of music built up. We usually do a couple of interpretations of covers. We do an interpretation of Woodstock on the first record. We do For No One on the second. We've got a couple
I like that term, interpretation.
Yeah. Well, you go back to the 60s.
Covers too many times are note for note, and it's like, that's
same
nice.
Thing.
Let me hear it.
Right. Well, you go back to Crosby, Stills, and Nash's reinterpretation of Joni Mitchell and what they brought to the table. You can listen to those two. Now we're taking it one step, in another direction. That to me is really what covering a song is all about, is bringing it to it. When we play live, we play some note for note stuff because you got to fill your set out. but we do try to bring as much creativity to the original, to the cover songs as possible. We do a nice mashup of Deep Purple's Highway Star and Flock of Seagulls, Iran.
Oh no.
Yeah. People are like, I wasn't expecting that to be coming, but yeah, we have fun with that one.
Well, good. You keep them on their toes.
Keep them on their toes. That's what we do. That's right.
Keep them coming back for more. What are they going to do next week?
What are they going to do next?
Well, the connections that we all make or have made because of the music that we love in common. You know, it's amazing how the Gentle Giant fans, in particular, there's something about the music that we love that just kind of brings us together with something we have in common. And not everybody around us gets what we get, but we get each other's music. You know, so it's been good to talk to you guys. I've really enjoyed this. You know,
thank you for having us. It's been so fun. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
could talk all night.
Yeah.
I know we could probably do 8 more sets. I had a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah.
Well, you guys will have to connect on Zoom sometime just for the heck of it.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But seriously, thanks for having us. And
Yeah.
you know, this is a great little series, and I hope it's very successful.
Yeah. It's fun to talk about Gentle Giant. Gentle Giant fans.
Yeah. Well, Frank, I guess we're gonna probably wrap this up here. But Bill and Madeline, thank you so much. I highly recommend to all the Giant fans to check out Eccentric Orbit, and of course they're on what albums, Frank? They're on Giant for Life.
Giant for Life and Giant Tracks.
Yeah.
And their 2 Eccentric Orbit albums are Attack of the Martians and Creation of the Humanoids.
Yeah. Yeah. Good listening. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Frank, for hosting the show. And I guess we're going to call it a day, but long live the Giant. Talk to you guys later.
Indeed. All right. Thanks a lot.
Dale. See you guys. Thanks again.
Thank you, Frank. All right. Bye-bye.
Silhouette